Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. I have one of these vlogs where, people have left comments on previous videos that were thought-provoking, and I wanted to give an entire video to addressing just a few of these. There's three things that I want to talk about that are somewhat controversial. Racks, the whole rack system, especially for ball pythons, where it's the most common. Spider ball pythons, and cutting eggs. Okay, so I'll be quick. I just want to, most of these comments were very respectful. I'm not calling anybody out. I just, I sometimes like to give a longer answer than is reasonable in a comment section. So real quick, the rack system. Before I get into what my beliefs are on my opinions are on a rack system, let me address a few things that I think are maybe silly. Some people are like, rack systems are just so unnatural. It's not like that in nature. Well, I'm sorry, but yeah, no duh. Like, this is our pets that we keep inside. You know what's natural for a ball python? Getting literally disemboweled by a hawk and eaten before you're dead. That is natural for a ball python, okay? A drought comes through, and there's no rodents to speak of, and you are half starved, maybe completely starved. Can't find water. That's natural for a ball python. A flood comes through, and the tunnel you've been staying floods out, and you don't have anywhere to go, and you're above ground during the day, desperately looking for somewhere to hide. That's natural for a ball python. So yeah, a rack system or a a nice tank that's all set up, or even a gigantic room-sized enclosure full of plants and bioactive. None of that is like nature. Some of it's more so than others, but we can't have our animals that are our pets be in nature. Otherwise, they're not our pets. They're just a wild animal. That being said, I actually, my opinion on racks, okay? Honestly, I have shifted. And the people who question, is this the best for our reptiles? Is this right? I actually agree with you now, right? When I got into reptiles, I was just watching the videos and reading the people's websites and everything. And it was just obvious that the industry standard, especially for ball pythons, is a rack system. I didn't think anything of it. We built our racks, and we've bought racks and whatever, and they seem to work great. I still don't think the animals are being abused or anything. I just, obviously, over almost a decade of doing this, I've come to think like, man, there's just better ways. There's ways that you can meet more of their needs, more of their wants, that this just isn't able to do. So there's a few things that I want to point out before I move on to the next subject. One, we cannot anthropomorphize these animals in this way. They are not claustrophobic. They do not think the same things as we do, and this is a semi-fossorial species. They spend a significant amount of time in very tight, dark, cramped tunnels underground in the wild. So being in a tub, in a rack, is not unpleasant to them. It's not torturous. It's not, oh, they're just mentally suffering. Things that people say when they're on a rant against racks. I just think is baloney. That is in their. Sorry, I got a little helper here. That is in their nature, as it were, to be in tight, dark spaces. That helps them feel secure. They like that. That being said, in nature, they also come out. They look for water. They go at least to the edge of their burrow, if not just out and about, looking for food. They come out certainly looking for mates, looking for proper nesting sites. they come out, they stretch, they move, they are able to explore their surroundings, they get mental stimulation, exercise, and experience things, rain, sunshine, wind, fleeing from a predator, right? So obviously in a tub they can't do those things. Uh, so that's where the problem is in my mind. They don't have the space to exercise, and they don't have enough room in there for you to put interesting things to give them any mental stimulation. So that's really the issue. And I see two kind of solutions to this. One, don't use the rack system as it currently exists. Or two, pull out your ball pythons a lot. Let them out. A lot of people have snake kind of playrooms. I think I've seen Reach Out Reptiles does this. There's an Eastern Indigo breeder named Vic Herrick that I just love this dude. He does this. They just have a big room set up with a little snake obstacle course. It's big enough. They can run around. They can look at things. You can rearrange the stuff in there. There's hammocks. There's ropes. There's maybe potted trees and plants. And you just rotate through your snakes. And they each get a chance to just be a little more free, to explore, use their brain, get their body some good exercise. One thing I've heard a lot that makes sense to me, I don't have a scientific paper on this, but it makes good sense, is that the terrain out in the wild is not this perfect flat field all over the place, whereas in Iraq it is. So these snakes can move side to side and go around and curl and whatever, but they're not going up and down over things and over terrain. So the muscles along their back can somewhat atrophy. That is what I've heard. Makes perfect sense, rationally speaking, or logically speaking. And so giving them something with a little bit more height, so there's rocks and there's branches and things, just makes sense. Now, I am the first one to absolutely I will ridicule you if you try and tell me that a ball python is arboreal. That's just, I do not care that they've been found in trees. So have humans. Are we arboreal? Humans have also been found in the water. Are we aquatic? Can you be arboreal and aquatic at the same? No. Of course, if a ball python is chasing a rodent and it goes up a tree, they're going to try and go get it. If they're being chased by a badger, they're going to try and go up a tree. Yeah, but that does not mean they're arboreal. Have you guys ever seen ball pythons climbing? They fall off of stuff constantly. They're not good climbers. But you can still give them a little bit more height than a rack system so that they can have some things in there to add some terrain. Okay? So, long story short, we are planning, we're already in the planning stages of moving away from the traditional rack system here at the Reptile Barn. We are not in the business of judging other people for their rack systems, but I have come to believe in my own self that there are better ways to keep them that will make them happier, healthier animals that we can do for them. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to take a while. We have a lot of snakes. It's going to take a lot of time and money and whatever to transfer them all over to the new system, but that's what we're going to do in the long term. Okay? In the short term, we're going to continue what we always do and pull them out a lot so that they all get a chance to get some exercise and mental stimulation. Okay? So, next topic is spider ball pythons. Ooh, I don't know if I've ever done a video about this because the arguments are just so pathetic and juvenile that people have about this. There's so much just rage and accusations and whatever. I've always thought that I don't really care how far an animal deviates from normal. What I care about is if their quality of life deviates. Okay? So if you have a caramel albino where there's a high chance of that snake kinking, where the spine actually kinks, that's terrible. That's just terrible. I can't understand anyone being willing to work with that gene. You're just knowingly risking that you're gonna have animals that could be so deformed that they can't swallow, can't move properly. It might be fatal, right? no, that's an ethics issue for me. Uh, Another thing, all these keyboard warriors screaming about spider ball pythons, and they don't say a word about everyone breeding their panda pies, because super cinnamon, super black pastel are also known to have potentially, even if it's rare, it's known to be linked to that combo, severe deformities. Again, if you're so mad about spider ball pythons, why don't you give anyone crap over that? Hopefully you do. Hopefully you're at least consistent in your desire to go attack people for everything that you think they're doing wrong. But regardless, when I got into ball pythons, I didn't know that spider had a defect. And it just so happened that the first ball pythons we bought, some of them were spider. Like the very first shipment. And I thought it was beautiful. I was like, oh, that's so cool. We'll breed spiders. Well, obviously, they have a wobble, right? And it's genetic. You can't breed it away. It's linked to the spider gene. Just like Woma, just like, super spot nose. There's a lot of genes that have some sort of issue, whether it's severe or minor. Looking at the spider ball pythons I had, and then later the babies that they had, I never had one with a severe wobble, ever. And I thought, well, shaking a tiny bit doesn't decrease your quality of life. I couldn't see that it did. I always used the example of people whose hands shake, even a moderate amount of shaking. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell them that their life must be miserable and they shouldn't even exist because they have a defect. That's ridiculous. They can be perfectly happy. And so I never thought much of it until, it got more and more and more and more contentious. And I was like, man, I better, re-examine. Am I doing something wrong here? Like, I don't want to be unethical, right? So I was checking out more and more spider ball pythons, not of mine, just anything that I could look at, and still had never seen one with a bad, corkscrewing or anything like that. And I just didn't quite understand. And you hear rumors that some of those videos are kind of contrived, where people are like terrifying their spider ball python beforehand so that it'll be more extreme in the wobble so that they can be like, oh, look how terrible this is. And I don't know if that's true. I hope that's not true. The point is, I still wasn't convinced that there was anything wrong with breeding spider ball pythons. An ethics issue, of course. If you don't like it, then don't have it. Then that's kind of where I was leaving it for a long time. Well, we did finally end up with a spider ball python that we just had kind of rescued from a terrible, terrible situation with a horrific wobble. Just awful, right? Very difficult to feed. When we're not handling him, when there's no excitement, there's no food coming, there's no stress or anything like that, he moves around just fine. But still, a little bit of the weird balance stuff. And when you get him out, it's severe, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, maybe if there's even a slight chance of producing a spider that's like that, I suspect, again, trying to not anthropomorphize too much here, but I suspect that animal is at least a little bit less happy because of that spider defect, the wobble, right? So this is another time where I'm just kind of like, well, maybe I need to change my mind here. And again, I'm really not interested in going after other people who are still breeding spider ball pythons. It's not my point. I just am now kind of in that thinking phase where I'm like, should I don't want to do something just because the mob says I should, right? We will cancel you and destroy you if you're an evil spider ball python breeder. I don't care. Like, I think they're beautiful, and all the ones that I ever knew were happy animals, but now I'm like, okay, if there is a chance that this could happen with a ball python that I'm purposefully breeding, maybe I need to think twice. And I'm not saying I'm going to stop breeding them forever. I don't have very many. It's at least something I got to start thinking about, right? So that's where I am. I haven't come to any conclusions yet. Maybe someone who watches this video is gonna let me hear it down in the comments. If you're polite, I'll respond to you. If you're not, I may not. We'll see. Regardless, this is one that I would love more opinions on. But I just am not interested in the people who race around the internet demanding that everyone else conform to their opinions and their way of life. That's just obnoxious, and I'm not going to heed you. But I do like information. I do like opinions, especially ones that challenge mine so that I can think further and deeper. So let me know your thoughts on spider ball pythons. The last thing I want to touch on real quick that was a real recent comment that was done very respectfully that I do want to address was just talking about cutting ball python eggs, or really any reptile egg. So egg cutting, why do we do it? Some people do it from impatience. You know, there's people cutting their eggs at 45 days. That's insane to me. You're risking the safety of your pet or your sale, but it's a live animal that you're risking just for impatience. That's wrong, in my opinion. You carry on doing what you're gonna do. Don't mind me, but I think over here in my little nook of the world that you are doing something incorrect. But that being said, there are people like me who cut their eggs because they genuinely feel there are a few issues that you can avoid potentially by cutting the eggs once they're fully ready to hatch, right? When they're ready to breathe air, instead of it, you know, diffusing through the egg into their bloodstream. If you wait until the clutch is already pipping on their own, and then you cut the rest, especially if there's a late one, you can avoid, in my mind, two things. One, the very, very admittedly small chance, but that does happen, that the egg tooth that they use to cut out of their egg can break off or not form properly before they've actually managed to cut their way out. And they're doomed. They're just going to drown if left to nature, right? So that's one reason, is make sure they can get out, right? You know, a baby that can't be born normally, we're not going to be like, well, sorry, sucks for you. No, we're going to do a C-section, right? Like, that's crazy. We are allowed to medically intervene to preserve life. That's not maybe nature taking its course, but I see that as a good thing. Second, that happens, in my experience at least, a little bit more frequently. This just happened to me, by the way. This is why this is fresh on my mind. Babies can get kind of coiled or wrapped around by their umbilical cord, and it chokes them, and they strangle and die. And it's terrible. It's a fully formed baby. It's perfect. It's healthy. There's no reason it should not enter this world, and it chokes to death on its umbilical cord. You know, umbilical cords are long and skinny and windy, and snakes are long and skinny and windy. There's some potential for entanglement there. And that's sad. Where if you cut open the eggs enough to see, often you can tell if there's a loop of the umbilical just really tight around the snake. It's pretty obvious usually that it shouldn't be that way, and you can gently work the snake's body through that loop, and he's fine. Then he comes out on his own later when he's ready, and he absorbs his yolk. That's the other problem. When the umbilical cord gets cut off, they can't absorb any more yolk through it. So even if they manage to wriggle free, they're gonna be weak. They're not gonna have had that big meal kind of enter their gut that gets them through the first couple weeks after hatching. So that is the other concern. Now, do I ever pull my babies all the way out of the egg? No. Most of the time, I try not to even touch them. I just cut them open, I look, I put the flap that I cut back down, and I put them away. And they come out on their own, right? But I like to know that, one, they'll be able to get out still if they don't have their egg tooth working. And two, if there's an obvious loop of umbilical cord choking them, that I can get them out of it. So, I think that egg cutting is unnatural in the best way, if done properly. You gotta wait. I should say I'm going to wait, because I think it's the right thing to do, until the clutch is pipping and they're ready. If you cut them early, when they're not really ready yet to breathe air, or they're going to be in the egg for long enough that you're just allowing, bacteria potentially to enter the egg when they're still kind of incubating, that could be bad. If you disturb them enough and you cause them to come out of the egg prematurely, you just unnecessarily created a preemie baby there. That can have issues. Just, be patient, but also we are trying to give our snakes their best life, their best chance at life, and there's real medical reasons that sometimes you can help with, issues, I should say, that you can help with if you know they're there because you cut the egg. So that is all. So I guess to recap, I agree with your concerns about racks. I at least somewhat agree or sympathize with your concerns about spider ball pythons. I do not agree with the concerns about egg cutting, although I totally see that, to some people it just looks like sheer impatience, and they're like, why would you do this and risk your baby? Your heart's in the right place. I just think that there's legitimate reasons to cut eggs. And that is all. This is a longer video, but I really wanted to address these questions. I think that one of the parts of YouTube that I didn't think I would ever enjoy, but that I actually have appreciated, is interacting a little bit with the comment section. People give me really good feedback very, very frequently, and I love it. And so I try and give feedback to the feedback every once in a while. That is all. That is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. Till next time, we're the Reptile Barn.